problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. That was Margaret Thatcher, in case you did not know. Yet new polling reveals half of young Canadians favor socialism to capitalism. Yes, Fraser Institute teamed up with Leger Polling and a couple of think tanks in Australia and the U.S. And the findings are that 4 in 10 Canadians, certainly half of all younger Canadians, 18 to 24, prefer socialism to capitalism, even though they've actually not lived in proper, real socialism. But growing numbers of people, according to this study, want government spending and programs. They just don't want to have to pay for it. Of course. They want everyone else to pay for it, but they want it. And these findings were similar across much of the developed world. So this is one of those studies that I hope is really wrong, or that I'm not around to see the results for. Jason Clemens is Executive Vice President of the Fraser Institute and joins us now. Hi, Jason.
Good morning. Thank you.
All right. So your findings is that 42% of Canadians support socialism as a preferred economic system, and then it rises to 50% when you're age 18 to 24, and it then drops off at to 38% when you get over 55, because it's those over 55 who realize, oh, you got to pay for the socialism thing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on in terms of just the responses and level of support for socialism by age group. So one that you've already alluded to, certainly if you're over 55, even if you're really over 40, you have some recollection of a world where there was a legitimate, widespread alternative to capitalism. And we saw that in the Soviet Bloc countries and the misery that it imposed on their citizens, and the celebrations, frankly, when the Berlin Wall and the Iron Curtain fell. And so there's a real-world recollection of that alternative doesn't work. I think the second thing, though, that's going on is we've got more and more young people who are not working part-time, who are staying in school longer, and frankly, the quality of the post-secondary education that they're getting is certainly not as balanced as it used to be. And so what we're seeing is not only that they don't see a real-world alternative to socialism, a real-world alternative in socialism, but they're also not seeing the costs of potential socialism. And I think, so as I say, I think there's a lot of things going on in the data, but certainly that influence of not really living through the Soviet Bloc countries and what happened historically is part of the explanation.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at the polling, 65% of Canadians define socialism as government providing more services. 57% think socialism is the government providing a guaranteed minimum income. They don't seem to understand you don't actually own anything. And maybe they think, okay, well, that's cool. We'll all share everything. But they don't actually grasp that it's one thing to visit Cuba on vacation. It's a completely different thing to live there.
No, and I think that's a great point in that, regardless of the age group, what they mean when they say they support socialism is not what, say, people of my age think about immediately, which is socialism has a definition. It was tried broadly in the Soviet Bloc countries and in parts of China and in parts of South America, and it was across the board a disaster. What they mean by socialism, and I think part of this is the Bernie Sanders phenomenon, where he calls himself a socialist, but he himself evolved.
Yeah, he owns a lot.
So what they exactly. So what they mean, as you've said, is they don't mean that we want to go back to the government owning oil and gas companies, which they did in Canada, owning airlines, which they did in Canada. What they mean is they want a lot more government services that are quote-unquote free, and they want, to a lesser extent, but they still want a guaranteed income. The problem, though, as you've said, is they don't want to pay for it.
Yeah, it's not a small problem. They expect people like me and those over 50 to continue killing ourselves. I mean, I at this age, I'm like, am I ever not going to work a 70-hour week or a 60-hour week? I think a lot of people are looking at that, and at their wish, they'd like to just keep it status quo, let the older folk pay for everything, and they can just enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think the problem actually goes deeper than that in the sense that the type of taxes that are being supported,
right,
ostensibly to finance socialism, there is no data that we have, either in Canada or in the OECD countries, indicating that those type of tax increases can finance the kind of increases in spending that socialists advocate for.
right.
And so the problem, and we're living it right now in Canada, where the federal government says we can have $10 a day daycare, we can have massive expansions in transfers to families with children, we can have pharmacare, we can have dental care, but we don't have to pay for it with higher taxes. And the problem with that approach is we are having higher taxes, they're just largely hidden, and we are accumulating debt, which means at some point down the road, we're going to have to pay higher taxes or cut services. And so I think part of the problem in the discourse right now is there are too many political leaders and too many parties who are advocating for an unworkable set of policies that they just cannot sustainably last over time. And so younger people are being sold a bill of goods that simply cannot work.
Well, right, because like some of the findings read like an NDP talking point, they just want Canadians a new wealth tax when they should know we don't have enough wealthy people in this country to pay for everybody. We just don't. I mean, this talking point should have died a long time ago. However, it's just such a popular talking point. But it's also not sustainable at all what they want. But you see where this comes from. We went through 2 years of the pandemic where some people just stayed home, didn't work, and then got their checks. And now that the pandemic's over, they don't want to go back. They don't want to go back 9 to 5. They don't want to go back Monday to Friday. They don't want to go back to what they don't want to go back to. And it's causing some real problems with labor shortages, businesses unable to get good people to work. So we've seen the interruption in what happens. But it's very easy for these young kids. They want what they want.
And I think, you point to a really important insight, which is the current Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland, she wrote and has advocated for a wealth tax.
Yeah.
She now is in a position where she could have introduced a wealth tax. And my suspicion is that the Department of Finance, which is one of the best in the industrialized world in Canada, thankfully, I'm sure they have debriefed her on almost every country that has tried a wealth tax in the OECD, particularly those in Europe, have reversed it because it imposed enormous costs on the economy and it raised very little revenue. And so, again, we go back to, if we want all these things from government, if you want a dental program, $10 a day daycare, okay, but you have to pay for it. And if you look at the Scandinavian countries, which is where people like Bernie Sanders and AOC and others tend to gravitate to, they impose very high sales taxes and very high personal income taxes on middle-income earners. And to me, that's where the discussion's got to go, that if you want, on one side of the ledger, more programs guaranteed income, the answer is we need a GST at 25%, and we need much higher personal income taxes for middle income. So people making $40,000 a year are going to pay significantly higher taxes. And the data is very clear. They don't want to pay higher taxes.
Yeah, because they don't have enough money. That's the thing. You only have so much money. As Margaret Thatcher said, it's great until you run out of other people's money. Nonetheless, I hope your study's wrong, because I think that's a little alarming. But nonetheless, I don't think I'll be around here for when it actually happens. So there's that side of it, too. Appreciate it, Jason.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
There you go. Jason Clements, Executive VP of the Fraser Institute. Yeah, no question. Chrystia Freeland's not going to bring that in because she lives in Canada now, where she knows there are not enough rich people to tax, and she'd be one of those rich people that they would tax. Not going to happen there.